Hi class, how are you doing? Continuing our discussion, we're on to chapter 9. It seems like, it's hard to believe we're already at this point in the semester, so it really does fly by fast. So now we're going to start the next couple of chapters, we're really going to start getting into pay per performance, and a lot of probably the similar different ideas and different structures that you're probably used to and that you've seen in previous jobs. And if you even haven't seen any of this information, it's going to become incredibly relevant because now we're getting into kind of really the heart of where we're trying to accomplish with compensation with total rewards itself. So to kind of start off, compensation is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish with our recruitment and our retaining good people. Total rewards compensation, if it's about anything, it's about retention and keeping employees happy and trying to develop them long term. Obviously, how much money you make, what benefits you get is a big thing, but it really helps when you have good compensation plans. It makes better recruiting efforts, better, marketing brochures, better employee testimonials to be able to describe what it is to be a successful employee. Compensation needs to be able to help retain good employees and not just, we're going to pay you this amount and give you these benefits, come on board. It's about what can we do to constantly evolve these things? What can we do to improve upon our processes so that employees are staying happy and staying motivated. After we hire and retain, we want to concentrate then on building knowledge and skills. I'm sure in a lot of maybe your intro to management class, you guys talked about KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And really compensation is part of what that is. Because again, when we're developing job descriptions, when we're developing different ways to, slot employees, we need to be able to show, do they have the ability to move on to these other positions to be able to accomplish this? So that is an incredibly big part of it. And again, we want to make sure that as a good employer that we're motivating our employees to want to be the best that they can be. So let's talk about a few ways that compensation can help in this manner. So, when we're talking about motivation, there's three elements to what motivation is. What is important to the person? Everybody has a different reason for being in the workplace. If, for example, if you are, just out of college, you're not married, no kids, there might be certain things that are more important to you than others. Maybe you want to make as much money as possible. Maybe the ability to take more time off and travel is important for you. Whereas if you maybe are a mid-career individual with, with a spouse and kids and, a mortgage and all this fun stuff, your health insurance might be a bigger information for you, or your long-term retirement savings may be more important to you. So whatever motivates you, what is important to an individual person. And again, we try to create plans that are relevant to everybody, but most importantly, we need to motivate based on the individual person itself. We offer an exchange for something, so if we get your motivation as an employee, well, as an employer, how are we going to repay you? What are we going to do for your motivation? And a lot of that is, and I think where a lot of managers fail is that they assume that everybody wants a motivated employee, but what about a motivated manager? We don't ever talk about that enough, about what details it takes to have a manager who's motivated to want to do the right thing. So again, incredibly important. And then what is our desired behavior? So yeah, we want an employee to be motivated, but what are the outcomes? What do we want that person to know? What do we want that person to be able to accomplish in our organization? So all of this kind of relates to how we end up paying a person. So you see that employees prefer pay systems influenced by their own performance. COLA is a term you see a lot, which stands for cost of living adjustment. So basically, as taxes and as the cost of things go up, we adjust for that. But again, kind of the biggest trend right now in compensation and total rewards is more about flex comp, being able to, reward employees based on their personal needs. Because again, if you don't have any kids, for example, like for here, let's take here at OSU. One of the great benefits we have for our employees is tuition waivers for your dependents. Well, if you don't have any kids, you can't take advantage of that benefit, even though it's a great benefit. So you're not motivated to want to take advantage of that. So what else can OSU do for you as an employee if you don't have kids, for example? So this idea of flexible compensation is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish. There are a couple different theories that go along with motivation and how we keep employees engaged and what we do to kind of keep them moving. So there's a couple that I want to talk about. First off is what we call expectancy theory, which argues that people behave as if they cognitively evaluate behaviors possible in relation to the values of rewards offered in exchange. Which is basically just a fancy way of saying, what does somebody expect? What do they want out of the job? You know, what is the motivation to want to do that type of work? So again, make sure you fully understand what expectancy theory is, because again, it's becoming a very, very major part of compensation. Another motivation theory, which is probably the one that's most prevalent right now, is what we call equity theory, and that people are concerned about fairness and equity and motivation. So if I'm an accountant and I make $35,000 a year, well, the person sitting next to me who's also an accountant but maybe makes $45,000 a year, I may feel that's not equitable. That's not fair. We do the same thing. We have the same education. We have the same background. So why does that person make more than me? That's not fair, could be a common response. And in my role here at Oklahoma State, I deal with that pretty regularly because, again, in a situation like that, we may have a discrimination aspect going on. So I know a lot of you maybe have heard of the Equal Pay Act that says that, you know, men and women need to be treated comparable when it comes to equity. Well, if the male is making $45,000 and the female is making $35,000, we may have an equity issue and we're violating the law. So something that we need to be very closely paid attention to. But again, one of the big parts of motivation theory is equity theory. And kind of the final one is what we call reinforcement theory. Reinforcement basically tries to put everything under a broad umbrella and say, how can we reinforce these behaviors? What can we do to make sure that employees continue to stay motivated on what we're trying to accomplish? You know, so if their goals are tied to their performance, what else can we do to reinforce that behavior? It's something that's very, very important to look at. And technically, there's kind of a fourth motivation theory called goal setting, which is, again, it's less more really about motivation and more about what are you trying to get the final outcome to be. You know, we set goals for a multitude of reasons, and we set it, you know, obviously with motivation, hoping that if we set high goals, our employees will rise to that occasion. Of course, we have to be real careful not to set unrealistic goals and to set things that will set them up for failure. But again, it's something that we also want to consider as well. And kind of final for this chapter, the main thing is, we want to have kind of a pay per performance plan that really looks into different ways that we look at equity, as I talked about earlier. And there's two terms that I think that are really important to know about, and that's distributive justice and procedural justice. You know, distributive justice is fairness that is given to the employees. So again, if I have a bonus plan, for example, and I have $10,000 to give, well, if I give this person $3,000 and this person $4,000, but only give these people $1,000, is that fair from the people that are receiving $1,000? Do they perceive that as providing good distributive justice? Now, again, we all know that there's usually reasons behind that. You know, my highest performer is probably going to get paid more than the lowest paid performer based on, you know, sales goals or whatever the goals that you determine are. So, but again, these are the types of equity that employees, especially who will come to like my office here at OSU, will make complaints about because, again, they don't feel like there's justice going on and they want our office to remedy it. But probably the more definitive and more known aspect is procedural justice. Basically means, did everybody get to follow the same process? So we see this a lot, like if you post a job, you know, a lot of companies will say, okay, we have an internal candidate and we know we want to hire that person. So why would we post the position if we know we want to hire that person? Well, and again, a valid question, but it's something we have to consider is, if we don't post the position, are we being fair to everybody? You know, and that's part of, did everybody who maybe wanted to get that promotion, did they have an equal opportunity to apply for it, to interview for it, to show why they're the most qualified? And we see a lot of issues with that a lot of times because, again, employees don't feel like they've had the ability to follow the same procedures as everybody. And that can get employers in a lot of trouble. And especially at a place like OSU, which is a public employer, one of the big things that we have to do as public employers is make sure employees get due process and make sure they get certain things that are guaranteed them by the state constitution. So being fair procedurally is a big part of what we're doing. So thanks everybody for chapter 9. Again, these are the highlights. Again, make sure you read everything in the chapter because everything is kind of fair game for moving forward. But these are the highlights that I wanted to make sure you know. Thanks everyone.